Representative Bryan Steil is from Wisconsin's 1st Congressional District. He chairs the House Administration Committee. Good morning, Representative. Good to have you on.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Well, I've tried with Mike Gallagher. I've tried with Juan Ciscomani, and they're both being diplomatic about the knucklehead caucus within the GOP caucus. 5 members refused to vote for the defense appropriations rule. They are Dan Bishop, Ralph Norman, Matt Rosendale, Andy Biggs, and my old friend Ken Buck. I can't figure it out, except that I've read that Ken's going to take a contract with CNN, so maybe he thinks this adds a couple of zeros to his number. What is wrong with these people? The defense appropriations rule.
Well, at the end of the day, it looks like we're going to be able to get that across the line today. So maybe Republicans in the House of Representatives are a little bit like the United States in World War II. We're going to have to try all alternatives until we finally come to the table and assist. It sounds like we're going to be able to get this bill across the line today. That's a really positive thing for our Defense Department, but also our country. And hopefully we're successful in that this afternoon.
Well, I can't believe Matt Rosendale is anti-military. Dan Bishop wants to be the Attorney General of North Carolina. I don't know what's gone on with Andy Biggs, but do they understand what it means not to fund the DOD?
And making sure we get these priorities right in the Department of Defense bill is absolutely essential. We're having a broader conversation about spending and what those levels need to be. I think that's appropriate in some sense, but we got to make sure that we're moving the appropriations process forward. And the Republican drafted Department of Defense bill is an amazing step forward to make sure we're protecting the United States of America, funding the United States military, and putting forward conservative policies while doing that. And so hopefully later today this does pass.
All right, now let's turn to the bigger issue of the overall spending in the government. Right now, the Republicans get to put the ball in play. They get to inbound the ball. They get to send something to the Senate. They're going to lose that chance if it stays gridlocked. Are you making any headway on the larger 1-month CR?
Well, we had about a 2.5, 3-hour meeting yesterday where a lot of people came to the microphones and spoke. I do think we're making some progress. The frustration here is exactly as you say. Just as there's a group of members who want it my way or highway saying, let's cut the spending, we also have a group of members that'll say at a certain point they're willing to work with Democrats and just continue to fund as we are. The sooner we come to a conservative agreement bringing both of these groups to the center, the better off that we are going to be, because failure to inbound the ball, as you say, will simply mean that Democratic levels of spending will continue. That is not positive for the American people.
Now, my reading of the reporting is that there are 15 members in the Do Nothing caucus. Is that still 15 or is that number falling? It's got to get down to, you can have 4 knuckleheads and run the place, but you can't have 15.
I think we're making progress at bringing people into the fold, giving them confidence that we are moving these appropriations bills through, and I think also informing people about what this means. These appropriations bills are not only how much you spend, but what you spend it on. And the current funding of government was set under Democratic one-party control. It's the priorities of Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden. This is our chance to get our conservative Republican policies and priorities in place, which is why it's so essential that we move these appropriations bills through. We can get the level of spending down, control that, but also make sure we're doing things like securing the U.S.-Mexico border.
Now, Congressman Steil, can you explain to me, because I don't get it, and I try and understand this stuff, the interplay between the rule and the defense appropes and the larger CR? If you get the rule and the defense appropes over to the Senate, do you expect them to move that before the continuing resolution for the entire government? Or is that just part one of a dance that's going on in parallel with the continuing resolution?
Yeah, these dances are going on in parallel. This is where your federal government spending process is wildly broken. I think we should go and do a massive reform of that so we stop these games that seem to play out every year in Washington. We've run out of the clock, which means we have to hit a continuing resolution just to fund the government while we work on these appropriations bills that are all due at the end of the year. But beginning to get these across the line, defense appropriations, probably the most important of all of them, begins the opportunity for the House and the Senate bill to come together into a final piece of legislation that's able to pass and be signed into law.
So what I'm really getting at is if the defense approach gets through the House and a Senate bill comes out, you go to conference and you pass that. It would not be part of a continuing resolution then if a CR was necessary, correct?
That would be correct. If that got all the way across the line, half of your total discretionary spending, which is defense, would be completed, would have conservative priorities in place, would begin the work on the remaining 11 bills.
I just don't understand these 5 members. Have you talked to them, Congressman? Because Speaker McCarthy, I've known him for 30 years. He will talk to anyone as long as it takes to get to yes. What is their demand?
Well, I've had lots of conversation. I'll be perfectly honest. I don't always understand all of the nuance of their arguments. But the gist of it is I think a lot of people are putting a heavy amount of priority into the top line number. They're making arguments that they're frustrated with where we are. Well, count me in the team that's darn frustrated with where we are. But that doesn't mean that you then hit the brakes and stop the whole process. It means you got to double down and get the work done. Passing defense approach later today is going to be a huge step forward. Having a continuing resolution with border security in it, forcing the administration to get serious about the border. This is our leverage. We have an opportunity to do that, but the time is ticking.
Now, last question, Congressman. It's great to have you on, by the way. House administration, not a lot of people know what you do. So I want to take that opportunity. What does House administration do?
As chairman of House Administration, we cover a bunch of areas, everything from Capitol security into federal election law. Just yesterday, we had the commissioners of the Federal Election Commission in. I'm working on voter integrity legislation. We have over a third of all members in the House of Representatives on board, over half the Republican conference. We have an opportunity to make it easy to vote, hard to cheat. It covers a whole host of area, but election law and Capitol security are at the top of the list.
So that leads me to something former President Trump said to me 2 weeks ago on this show, that the old January 6th committee, which wasn't really a committee, it was a facade, that they destroyed their records. Now, that was news to me, and I can't find it confirmed. Did they destroy their records?
They have withheld certain records. Barry Loudermilk is the subcommittee chair for me on oversight. He's been bird-dogging this issue. We've been working to get some of these records back from the administration. Some of them were redacted, and we're going to have to continue to make sure that we have the full set of records from that select committee that was created by Nancy Pelosi.
Well, where did they send them? How does the House lose control of its own records?
Well, at the end of any Congress, so while Democrats were in control, there's an obligation to maintain those records and store them. When they provided those to the Committee on House Administration at the end of Congress, when it flipped from Democratic control to Republican control, it was a mess. Think of every book in a library being torn out and thrown on the floor without the Dewey Decimal System. We've been working to put that back together, do the inventory. Do we have everything? This is a laborious process. We've identified certain things that we think we're missing, and we've been going and pushing to make sure we have all of those documents back. The American people deserve to know that we have every document that the January 6th committee, as set up by Nancy Pelosi, had. We have possession of them. We can review them. We can provide them to the American people.
Now, I hate to belabor this, but was that intentional on the part of the 1-6 committee, or was that just the general chaos that happens with a turnover?
No, that's an intentional attempt to make sure that this was not an organized manner. It's very clear that the digital documents that were provided used to be in a structured database. When they provided them to us, they provided them in an unstructured manner. Truly think of, cabinets filled of digital documents that were organized and structured where someone could go in and find what they were looking for, and then pulling all those off the shelf, dumping them in a pile and saying, I gave you all the books in the library. You did, maybe you did, but boy, it's a giant pile on the floor rather than an organized structure like any rational adult would do.
Does that damage the former president's ability to mount a defense in any or all of the 4 indictments that he faces?
I don't know that it limits his defense. It's more just a frustrating part of the fact that this committee wasn't interested in people looking at their work product and why they did what they did. They interviewed certain people. They didn't interview others. They wanted to drive forward a narrative that they selected, and it's why we're working to make sure that the full narrative is available for the American people.
Now, there's also a story, and I don't know whether to credit it, that you cannot call the Capitol Police before the current committee to find out what happened in the non-preparation for January 6th. Is that in fact correct, or are you delaying that for any particular reason?
Oh, no, we've been working on this. It just doesn't get the press coverage that I think it deserves. Just yesterday, we had just this week, we had the former chief of the Capitol Police come in and testify, and we specifically asked him on the record, whether or not he had conversations with the House Sergeant at Arms, a direct appointee of Speaker Pelosi. He says he did. She said he did not. We've pointed out a whole host of things. Again, I don't think it gets the press coverage it deserves, but we've been having many of these people on the record explaining their perspective of what took place in particular in the lead up to January 6th.
I look forward to reading that record. Congressman, thank you. Good luck in getting everything done today and bringing the Knucklehead Caucus a little common sense, especially Matt Rosendale. I'm going to talk with Governor Gianforte. I think all these people should be primaried or beaten in whatever they run for because they're hurting the United States Department of Defense. Thank you, Congressman.